Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Welcome to this segment of the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host. Folks, it's cold out there. It is cold out there, but trust me, it's going to be just fine today. In fact, we're going to have a real nice session, a nice chat with someone that I've come across, and I'm really appreciative of the fact that he's going to be here on the show today. And you're going to find it very interesting, like I found it very interesting, especially after I read this article that Jeff Mapes put together. And basically he did an overview, or if not that, an interview with the new state chair of the Republican Party, a gentleman by the name of Art Robinson. I got so excited about the article that I invited the gentleman to meet with him. We chatted a bit, and next thing I know, he drives 5 or 6 hours just to come out and meet me. And we sit down and we chatted for a moment and whatever. And you know what? The guy just sounded just like an Oregonian. It sounded like a good American and issues and economics and education, all the things that I've been talking to you about for years here on the Oregon Voters Digest. So anyway, we're fortunate not only just to have the chair of the Republican Party for the state of Oregon, but a true American. Just go right down the line. Very refreshing person or whatever. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going on an interview. Art, how you doing?
Okay, how are you?
Welcome to the Oregon Voters
Thank you.
Digest.
It's a privilege to be on your program.
Fantastic. Well, look, Art, before we get into the politics of the matter, the first thing I want to do, I want to share with my viewing audience just who is Art Robinson, okay?
Well,
let's do that. What about, how'd you get here? Is Oregon your home? Or
I came to the West Coast to go to college. I went to Caltech. I'm a scientist,
okay,
a biochemist. And I work on biochemistry, and I work on the development of new tools for medical diagnosis, for the diagnosis of disease. And we have a research laboratory in Southern Oregon called the Oregon Institute of Science and
Medicine.
Medicine.
What does diagnose disease? What does that mean? Break it down for us.
You don't feel good. What's wrong with you?
Okay.
And there are very advanced techniques you can use in chemistry, which we work on in order to determine the health of a person and what's wrong with them faster and more effectively.
How long have you been doing this?
I've been doing that for 40 years.
40 years?
Yeah.
Wow. And you started up in California, I guess?
We started in California after I got out of school. I used to be on the faculty of UC San Diego.
Oh, really?
And then started a research institute with my friend Linus Pauling.
And who was he?
He was a great chemist from Caltech and also worked on medical things. So we worked together with that for a long time. And then when we came to Oregon 33 years ago, my wife and I and some of our colleagues started a research laboratory in Southern Oregon.
So she was a scientist too in her own
She
rights.
was also a scientist. And then I've done a few unusual things. During the Cold War, I worked on civil defense, protection of people from the effects of war. I worked on the issue of human-caused global warming, pointing out that the science is not consistent with the propaganda.
You mentioned something else in that discussion about sickle cell.
Well,
what was that?
That was the first molecular disease discovered. It was discovered by people I worked with at Caltech earlier than I worked with them. Sickle cell anemia is a disease of the hemoglobin molecule. It's genetic. One amino acid is changed. And this causes the red blood cells to crystallize, and the cell is distorted. And then the cells can't get down the capillaries.
So that's where that sickle cell comes in.
And it's called sickle cell anemia. The reason it became so prevalent is that although 1/4, if you have both genes for sickle cell anemia, you're very ill and you usually don't live a long life. But if you have one of the two genes, you're immune from malaria. So especially in Africa and other malaria-prone regions, people, even though parents, if each parent carried one sickle cell gene, 1/4 of their children would die at an early age. Half of them would be immune from malaria. And malaria was such a scourge that this kept the disease in the population. And it was discovered at Caltech in the 50s that it's the reason for it, that it's the hemoglobin molecule undergoes a slight change, the molecule that carries oxygen in the blood. But it was the first genetic disease truly understood, and very important in biochemistry.
Are we still experimenting within that area?
We're still experimenting. The diagnosis is easy, But it is a little expensive, so the kind of things we do could make the diagnosis less expensive
Oh,
than
really?
it is.
That you're doing now?
Yeah. Our work is to drive down the cost of diagnosis so it can be so cheap that people don't have to really be sick to go and see how their health is, that they can do it inexpensively. But also, the therapeutic advances in sickle cell anemia still go on. You can't change the genetics, but you can ameliorate the symptoms. And so people with the disease live longer and longer as a result of what's learned about how to deal with their problem.
Yeah, in fact, and when I think about the reason why I asked you about that is here within the metropolitan area, they tend to identify that a greater number of the population are African Americans, and you constantly hearing the whole issue of sickle cell.
This is because they lived in tropical regions where malaria was prevalent. In Africa, where Albert Schweitzer was, for example, virtually everyone at the hospital, including the doctors and nurses, had malaria. Malaria is endemic. And now malaria was eradicated in the United States with DDT and almost eradicated in other parts of the world until there was an environmental program against DDT, and now malaria has risen again. But it's a special scourge in the regions of Africa.
So African American.
And that is the reason that it is prevalent in the African American population, because it had made them immune to malaria, even though they got the sickle cell disease.
You mentioned the fact that you were doing, in fact, i.e., sort of urine sampling, if you will, of various diseases.
Yeah, we now, the diagnostic medicine is the kind of thing we do.
Yeah.
We now can take your urine sample and measure 5,000 chemicals in it quantitatively in a few seconds.
Wow.
And those 5,000 substances are mostly produced by your body in the process of living. They're small molecules that you require for life. If you measure 5,000 of them in a urine sample, you can pretty well tell what your health is.
Really?
And tell about how old you are physiologically, what diseases you're likely to obtain. Right now, we're making it practical. We've worked for many years on the analytical methods. Now we're calibrating them. And to calibrate them, we're collecting urine samples from thousands of people, storing them cryogenically, and then measuring them and correlating them with their health. After this job is done, this kind of technology will be available to ordinary people.
Now, could you, again, here I am going back to this sickle cell, that's how we started this conversation. Is there still further studies that might be identified? Could you identify those elements within?
I'm sure that the kind of thing we do, or the people in our field, will make it easier to diagnose. And it will also make it easier to see if therapy is working. In other words, if you have a measure of health, you 5,000 substances from your metabolism, you really know what your health is. If you have a quantitative measure of your health, then you can change the conditions of life, the therapy the sickle cell patient or any other patient is undergoing, and with something that can put a number on their health, as you make a change in therapy, it will change either better or worse. Once you have a measurement, you can modulate the therapy more intelligently. Instead of a guy coming in with cancer and you say, well, it's too bad you got it, take this drug, we'll see if you live. You say, take the drug and we'll measure you every day to see how you're doing. And that means that if the drug is helping, you would see the cancer recede. And if it's hurting, it would go, it might not recede, and you'd have time to try something else. So in sickle cell anemia, for example, there are, and I'm not up on all the therapies for it, but there are a number of therapies. If you have a quantitative measurement of the disease, other than the guy saying, well, I felt worse or better, which is not very quantitative, if you have a way of putting number on the severity of the disease, then you can try different therapies and see objectively how they're doing. You don't have to wait a year and have the guy's health deteriorate terribly to know whether the therapy is working. You can find out quickly. So one of the things that our work's directed toward is trying to measure illness quantitatively so that therapeutic methods can be more effective.
Okay, good. And who is this information for?
We're a nonprofit research laboratory, so like university labs, we publish everything in the open literature. So anything that we discover, we publish in the literature for everyone. There are no patents or rights to anything we do. And then anyone can pick it up and commercialize it.
So people like the CDC
Anybody can use it.
Anybody
yeah.
can use that aspect.
So
of it.
it's a lot of science develops that way, especially
okay.
basic research in the universities. And if you publish in the open literature, you give up all commercial rights, but the literature is read all over the world, so whatever you discover is more important because it's used more widely.
Oh, that's interesting. Interesting. Well, now I take it, and that's another thing that I was so excited about art here. As you see, I'm going down this direction. That you're open for urine samples, right, across the
Well,
board.
right
Anybody
now,
for that matter?
your
How you doing?
viewers may eventually get a request from us.
Was that right? Okay.
Yeah, we recently sent a request to everyone in Josephine County.
Good. Okay.
And we'll be sending some other counties. And before we're done, we probably will have sent a flyer asking people to participate in our
Sure.
project to
Okay.
everybody in Oregon.
Oh, great, great, great.
But that'll be done over the next year or so.
Okay, good. Well, there you hear it. Hopefully, we've got that information.
So when you
out
get
to
a request for a urine sample from us,
okay.
you'll know why.
Is there a website that one can go to? And
Well, you can go to the Oregon Institute of Science and Medicine website, but you
Okay.
don't go there to sign up to participate.
Right.
Although you could.
Right.
I think the flyer's on there, and you're
Right.
welcome to participate if you want to sign
Okay,
up.
so it's on that website.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. And how's it named? How's it?
That's oism.org,
Okay. Okay.
Oregon Institute of Science and
Okay,
Medicine.
and it would denote i.e. urine sample and.
Well, then you'd see the project on
to see
there.
the project on there.
And
Okay.
you'd see a flyer about it. You'd see the flyer we're sending out.
That sounds good. Okay. Well, you can see, folks, that article that I read in the Oregonian was very interesting. That's why I sort of targeted that particular aspect. There was another area that I was very interested in,
Yeah.
and the whole issue of the fact that your wife, I guess, had passed away,
Yeah.
and you talked about the education of your kids, the homeschool.
Yeah,
Talk about that.
Well, I have six. Well, they're young people now.
Yeah,
they're
right,
not
right.
children anymore. But my wife and I had six children. She was a scientist also. We worked together.
Here in Oregon, you had them all.
Yeah, and well, two were born before we came here. No,
Okay.
three before we came here.
Okay.
And she was homeschooling them.
Mm-hmm.
But she died when they were ages 1.5 to 12. So I had to continue the education, but I had to also make a living. So we kept our homeschool going, but without a teacher. It's self-taught. And this worked very well for us, remarkably well, so people advised us to make it possible for others. So when they were truly children, they scanned all of the books and materials they used for their education onto 22 CD-ROMs, started selling it, and 60,000 homeschool students now use their curriculum. And that's the way the children work their way through college, selling homeschool curriculum.
If I were to ask you, I'm sure being a scientist that you were, you probably did your homework in regards to even public schools.
Yeah.
But the bottom line, if I were to ask you, did you research that aspect of it, and did you look
yes.
at those options in terms of going to public schools?
We did,
and
and I must say, American public schools historically were truly excellent. When I went to the schools 50 years ago, American public schools were the best in the world. I got a great education that got me into Caltech, and I've had a wonderful life in science, which I owe initially to those public schools. But over the last 50 years, we've had the encroachment of the public employee unions, the state government, the federal government, and they've taken control of our schools away from our local people. And when they were locally controlled, the competition between the localities and the school districts and all of the resources being allocated by people who knew the students, they were part of the local community. When the local community controlled the schools, we had the best schools in the world. Now that local control has been ceded to big government and big unions, and the result is the United States is about 20th in the world, and it's a tragedy. And also we have tremendous heterogeneity. In our country, some schools are still good, but in many of the less affluent sections, our schools are really very, very poor. And this injures a student for life, because if he doesn't learn basic skills, then he has trouble in life. He can be very, very smart, brilliant, but without fundamental academic education in math and reading, and simple things, you're hurt in life. It doesn't matter what you plan to do. Good education is good for everyone.
Very much so. So as a result of the homeschool,
the homeschool movement
Okay.
only has about 3 million people in it. There was no such thing when I went to school, and there shouldn't be any need for it. But with the public schools being taken away from local control and the quality going down, more and more people want to educate their children at home because the schools aren't doing the job.
And we definitely have an issue right here in the Portland metropolitan area.
Oh, yes, and in Portland, the average educational cost of a student is $10,000 per year. In Portland, it's 14,000, and the only far less than half, probably a third of that money actually goes to the classroom. All the rest goes to special interests that have their hands in the money. So one of the reasons they've deteriorated is that as state and federal government and these public employee unions got control of the schools, then the special interests got the money. So, I mean, if, for example, the average across the country is 10,000 per student. So in a 30-student classroom, that's $300,000. But if you think the classroom with 30 students anywhere in this state is getting $300,000 to teach with, you're crazy. You know, the teacher is paid only a tiny fraction of that, and only maybe 100,000 of the 300,000 reaches that classroom, and the rest goes to special interests, and those special interests generally screw up the education because they tell the teachers what to do when the teachers are trying to do their job.
Good point.
So the public schools in the United States for a couple of centuries basically were the best in the world, but they were run by the local people, the parents, the PTAs, the local people who were concerned about the education
Making
of
sure
their
those monies
students.
got into the classroom.
Yeah, and they
teachers.
also were concerned about their students because they were local, and they competed with other local school districts. It's this taking the schools away from local control that is our problem, and we need to fix it.
Okay. Now let's go back to your school, your home school. What was the results of your home school with the kids?
Oh, it was truly excellent. They 4 of them have doctoral degrees, and 2 are still working on it.
What was that again now?
Four of my 6 children have doctorates now, and 2 of them are still working on those degrees. And 3 of them were in college only 2 years because they skipped 2 years of college because they learned a lot more in their home school than they would have in a public school.
It's my understanding you wrote some of that curriculum too for them, right?
Well, we worked on it together.
You worked on that?
Yeah.
This was with whom? You and your wife, you mean?
No, she was gone.
Okay, she was
The
gone,
reason
okay.
we developed the self-teaching homeschool curriculum was because she was gone and we didn't have a teacher.
I see.
In most homeschools, the mother serves as a teacher,
I see.
but we didn't have one. And the curriculum is especially popular because a lot of people, like single parents who have to work, they can't be a teacher. They don't have a second parent. And those people can educate their children because they don't have to help them. The curriculum's laid out so the child learns by himself.
It's my understanding some of the cohorts happen to be some of the kids, or some of the grown men now.
Yeah. Well, all of
How many are working with you in the
Well, all of us work
research?
together from one way or another. We have still the 7 of us. My 6 children and I work together, but they also have things in their own right. 2 of them are veterinarians. One's a chemist, one's a nuclear engineer.
Wow.
And but we all work together.
Wow. Well, now let's come up. Now we're getting ready to get into the politics of this.
Okay, well now.
All right. Now,
I'm
how
going to
did
be
you?
in trouble
When
because
did
you're
you first?
a smart politician.
No, by no means. I'm very low key.
I'm a scientist who just fell into politics because I wanted to try to help a little.
How did that happen?
You
Yeah.
know about politics.
How did that happen? Art?
Well, just an accident. My sons and I went to a town hall meeting that Peter DeFazio held.
Okay.
And we
Just curiosity?
Yeah, I've forgotten why we went to the
Okay,
meeting. It was
okay.
just downtown in Cave Junction, and we came home shaking our heads, saying that can't be our
Now,
congressman.
Peter, he's a congressman, right?
He's a congressman from District 4,
District 4. Okay.
and he's a big government man.
Okay.
But we didn't like what we saw. But there was a good Republican running against him, and we thought, that's great. We hope that he'll lose.
Yeah, right.
But that man dropped out of the race at the last minute, and my sons and I sat down and said, well, why don't we try it?
Yeah.
We didn't know what we were getting into, but we ran against him, and we did pretty well, and we're still running against him. We're trying to beat him.
Now, it's my understanding you'd run several times before that.
We ran twice.
You ran against DeFazio.
Okay,
so
that's the only thing we've ever done in
That was the
politics.
first time. Then the first time you ran, right?
Yeah.
How did you end up? What
I got 44%.
44%.
Yeah.
First time.
First time.
Well, you've never run for dog catcher or anything
No,
like that?
no, nothing.
That was that's it.
No,
That's it.
no.
Now the second time you're running.
Well, the
there
second
was some other
time,
things
that
happening.
was last time,
Okay.
and the presidential race
Right.
and the remarkable showing of Mr. Obama, who got a
Right,
huge
right.
vote. that diminished all the Republican votes. So we got 10,000 more votes in 2012, but we got a lower percentage because of the fact that it was a presidential year and the Democrats were doing so well.
There were some other little things about that particular time that I guess one of the sons had run.
Oh, that was
They
another
filed.
thing. Yeah, one day my youngest son, Matthew, who was 26, came in. He says, I think I'll change my registration run against DeFazio in his primary. And it was his thing. We said, really? And he said, yeah, I'm going to do this. So he did it. And it was remarkable. DeFazio hadn't had opposition in his primary for 20 years. Matthew got 20% of the Democrats in our county, 10 across the district, and did exceptionally well. Because you see, the political issues, they're not Republican or Democrat. They're American values, and which politicians, individuals, not parties, but which people will best represent us and maintain our freedom and maintain our prosperity and give everyone in this country a good life. And these issues are not partisan. So if you go out and explain to the people what we stand for, our issues are not even Republican issues. They were codified in the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Before that, the American settlers, starting at Plymouth Rock, developed these. And in fact, they're in books going back to antiquity. They're in the Bible. The best way for men and women to live together has been known for thousands of years. And we're just representing those values. And when you take those values into the electorate and talk about them, it doesn't matter what party they're in. We just had an election down in Josephine County where we won 4-1.
How did that happen?
The issues were explained to the voters in a way that they understood.
What was the issue that day?
The issue there was government overreach. The county commissioners were trying to put in a bureaucrat who would have search and seizure powers over the whole county. He could go around, he could knock on your door and demand to see whether you fixed your plumbing without a permit, this kind of stuff. Heavy fines, the fines going to pay the people who were assessing the fines. It's just a really draconian government overreach, but it has come to some counties. And our county didn't want it, but they didn't know it. So we took the issues out and explained it to them carefully. And Josephine County has 42% Republican, but we got 79% of the vote. Because the issue of human freedom, the desire to be free, to be your own man, to be free, to do what you want to do in life as long as you don't encroach on your neighbor, that's built into everybody. So when the voter visualized that hearing officer knocking on their door and demanding entrance into their living room, they didn't like it.
You know, the other thing that I was kind of interesting in our conversation was, you know, I've run for office too before, and knowing politics as I've known politics, it can get very dirty.
Yes.
And you'd made mention about the fact that DeFazio had kind of, you know, he basically, because he's been in that for quite some time. He
25 years.
25 years in that deal aspect of it. And so, anyway, there were some things that happened, because I noticed I saw you on MSNBC.
Oh, yeah.
With Maddow.
Yeah.
And would you mind sharing some of the things that
Well,
you experienced? Let's put it this way.
the opposition, you see, with good, solid American values, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Constitutionalist, the question is what your values are and what you will do if elected. Those values you communicate. It's our job, if we represent them, to communicate them to the voters so that they will decide that we should represent them. It's the other side's job to keep us from communicating. And the way they do it is by not telling the truth. So I'm astonished. There's a sort of straw man in our district, and he walks around the district. He's a terrible person. He has all kinds of horrible characteristics. And his name is Art Robinson. He has the same name as me. He's a creation of Mr. DeFazio's, you see. And they tell a lot of tales they shouldn't tell. You have to have kind of a thick skin to run for office in this country.
Yes, very much so.
So,
Yeah, very much so.
It would be humorous, actually, humorous what they do, except that it's so important, it's so serious, because when they do the wrong thing, our people become less prosperous. They have fewer opportunities in life. It's harmful to all of us. Here, my family decided to work on this because we saw real problems in our country, and we didn't want these problems to get worse. And yet look at us. We have all the advantages. We have these doctoral educations. We're scientists. We're the kind of people you'd think would be able to do good things. Yet every time we turn around, we can't do what we need to do. Our medical research is impeded. All kinds of things are impeded because there's too much government. And so we decided we wanted to help a little bit. That's why we did it, not because we just happened to run into this guy, pardon me, but because the government overreach has gotten so bad that productive people can't accomplish the things that they would, and that hurts us all.
You know, again, and I'm not trying to quote just jump on DeFazio just over and over and over, but the bottom line is that it's many folks who might be looking at getting into politics need to kind of get a feel for what you'll be going in regards to an incumbent.
Yeah, but you
What are
see,
some of the examples?
if these things, this is worth doing.
Yes.
But the people who have been taking away our freedom and costing us our prosperity, and see, there are many people are suffering in this country.
Yes.
And I know we can help them. But to help them, we have to get these overpaid bureaucrats and politicians off their backs. And this is not a good thing they've done to us. They're not nice people in what they've done to us. So when you go up against them and try to get them out of office, you can't expect to be treated with kid gloves, and you're not.
Because because you know, a lot of times people would always make the reference, if you will, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. What do you think we are from 1 to 10? Where are we there? If 10 say we are definitely a government of the people, by the people, for the people. 1 to 10, what do you think? What do we rank?
We've lost 2/3 of that at this point.
2/3.
I'd say we've lost 2/3 of it at this point, and we're in danger of losing the rest. You see, take our public lands. Oregon is rich in natural resources, forests, minerals, everything, water, richer than Switzerland, and yet the Swiss people are 3 times as wealthy per capita. And this is because our people are deprived of the use of these resources. They speak of government land. No, that's public land. It's public land. It should be used by the public. It should be regulated so that we don't harm the land and harm the resources. But they've got to thinking it's government land. And the government bureaucrats and the government people come and tell the people they can't use their land. And that, of course, has made Oregon poorer. And you may not be a farmer, but if it's harder for a farmer to farm, you're paying for it with higher food prices. Now, you may not be a miner, but if that miner can't mine, we have to buy those minerals from some other country, and you become poorer because our country has to spend money in this odd way. So government overreach is harming our schools, it's harming our industries, driven lots of our industries abroad. It's harmed our energy industries so that energy is cheaper in other countries and our industries move there. There are 2 ways to put it. One, we can diminish the government overreach and get our freedom back. And the other is, if we apply good principles, we can help. And people must understand that these are complicated things, but men and women have known for thousands of years that living a free life is better for everyone when everyone is free. And if we can live in freedom, we can help the people. We understand the people's pain. We understand what people are going through in this country. And it's terrible for the lower 90% of Americans. And we can help, but we need to be free to do so. And we're not free of these bureaucrats and these institutions that the career politicians seeking their own self-interests have created.
They've got to be only Republicans, right?
Oh, the people from career politicians from all parties are involved in this thing.
Across the line.
Yes, there tends to be more of the big government people in the Democrat Party, but there are some fine people in the Democrat Party, and there are some scoundrels in the Republican Party. And I say that as chairman of the Republican Party.
I got you.
So it isn't a question of party, it's quite a question of principle. And when a party puts up a first-rate man or woman who believes in human freedom, feels the people's pain, wants to help them, that person should be supported. And when they put up some guy who's in it for himself, and he's going to go into office and just see how much power and money he can amass for himself, that career politician, you should vote against him, regardless of what party he's in.
On that particular note, we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back with Art. And in fact, we might even open up the lines. Okay? We'll be right back.
You are watching Oregon Voters Digest. This program can be seen again on these channels on these dates and times. Tell a friend.
Welcome back, folks, to the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host. My guest today is a gentleman by the name of Mr. Art Robinson, who's chairman of the Republican Party of Oregon. Okay, we've had quite a conversation. For those of you who missed the first half of the show, you can do the repeat back on Tuesday and then that following Friday. You're very familiar with the format here. Okay, so we're just going to get right back to Mr. Robinson. Art, how you doing again?
Okay.
Fantastic. You know, we've gone through, quote, who's Art Robinson?
Yeah.
His research in terms of his employer. We've gone through homeschool, the family, et cetera, and then we got back into basically the government of the people, by the people, for the people. And we did noted that 2/3 of that was gone, so we were sitting up there with
You
1/3.
asked me my estimate.
Yeah, your estimate, which is good. I think you're right on. Okay,
Yeah.
and I think the majority of the people that are out there would probably share that with you. Now let's get into this arena now. Okay, you've run for office. First off, real quickly, are you going to be running again?
Yeah.
You going to run again? Okay.
Well, he's still there.
Okay, I got you. Okay. You know, when we were,
We have it to do.
I heard that. When we were talking about that, were there any specific platform issues that you were bringing to the table when you were talking to him? And
Well, yes, quite
Okay.
a few.
Okay. What are
For
some of them?
example, our schools, as we've talked about
Right,
that.
right.
They need local control.
Right. Okay.
We have a lot of idealistic teachers, great opportunities in the school, but the government overreach is killing them.
Right. Okay.
And Mr. DeFazio has voted against every effort to change that because he gets support from the public unions at election time, and the unions don't want to change. The unions are not made up in majority of teachers, the education unions. They're made up of all the people that have their hand out for money that doesn't teach. So Mr. DeFazio and I differ because he wants to keep things the way they are, and I want our schools to go back to the quality they were under local control. In other issues, interestingly, I advocate more payment in Social Security than he does. The Social Security payments have fallen behind. Now, Social Security has been badly handled. The government has really defrauded the people. They've spent money that didn't belong to them, and they've gotten the program into trouble. But I advocate that the people, that they receive more money so that they can catch up with what they were promised. And then that the program also be altered so it doesn't fall behind in the future. And we differ on that. He likes the program the way it is, but it's going broke. I mean, that doesn't fix it. We are greatly different on the regulatory and tax structure. When you tax $1 away from an American, you take that capital out of the economy and give it to a bureaucrat or someone who has chosen the bureaucrat. There are many things the government does, and it needs money. But if you do too much of it, you kill the private sector. And in regulation, it's the same way. Oregon has some of the highest regulations and taxes in the United States. And The politicians, the career politicians, will tell you, oh, we're taking care of you. We're preventing bad things with the regulations, and we're getting this money so we can help you. But in fact, the special interests that they empower pocket most of the money, and we're just left with less resources in our private sector to create jobs and give true prosperity. There was a famous economist named Julian Simon. His life's work showed that people always produce more than they consume, that a civilization, a society, always produces more than it consumes and becomes richer with time if the people are free to do so. But if you put too much government on their backs, they aren't free to do so, and they become poorer. And that's happening to us. That's why there's so much debt in our economy. People can't make it, and they have to borrow in order to survive. And this is a bad thing, and we're getting greater and greater debts because of this. Mr. DeFazio represents those who want to grow the government bigger and bigger. And that just benefits the career politicians like him. He's been in office 25 years, and the special interests who pay for their re-elections. They don't help the people.
DeFazio, if you don't mind, when you were running, I'm sure you've done some vetting, if you will. What was his background?
Well, he doesn't have much of a background except politics. He went to college. He got a degree in gerontology but never used it. He went immediately into politics and worked for Congressman Weaver, and then Weaver left the seat and he took it over. So DeFazio has
in the private sector.
He basically has no experience except as a career politician.
Interesting.
And that's not a good thing.
No,
you want people. When our family looked at the situation, we're lucky, we're blessed. We have these educations, we have the interesting science to do. We could probably live our lives pretty well, even though things are decaying around us. But we see what's happening to our fellow Americans and what's happening to our nation, and we felt we couldn't remain silent. We had to work on it. And more this is happening. People are coming out of private life that were never in politics. And in a way, they're better because they aren't career people. They don't want. I put it this way: sometimes I couldn't lose that election. If I won, I got to go to Washington and try to help fix things. If I lost, I didn't have to go to Washington.
At least you got good staff.
But to a guy like DeFazio,
yes, right.
His whole life is in Washington because the money and power there is what keeps him going. That's all he's done in life. He has no practical experience in life, just money and power in Washington.
Well, on that same note, now let's get right into this other issue. Now here you are. You run twice, and you did fairly well. You did real well, for that matter. And now you're still interested in going back to the table and facing this guy off at the same time. But during that interim, also, you're now the chair of the state Republican Party. I mean, there's been all sorts of, quote, where is the state Republican Party of the state of Oregon? How'd you get in that deal? And why would you do that?
Maybe I say I went to the wrong meeting, but that isn't true. The state party needed a new chairman, and they were going to elect one, and quite a few people asked if they could nominate me. And I said, well, my family thought about it, and we said, there's something else to do. How can we do this? And then we thought, yeah, but we could do some good. We're trying in the contest with Mr. DeFazio to elect one better congressman. But as chairman of the state party, I can be involved in the election of hundreds of better people to office. So it was an opportunity we couldn't say no to, and they needed someone and did not have anyone of comparable ability running for the office. So we took it on. And it's a very interesting experience. I can say I'm still in Will Rogers mode. I haven't met a single person in the party I don't like. I've met some I think are misguided, but that's not the same thing.
Okay.
And it's a wonderful experience, but it's also a challenge. And you can understand it's a challenge because the Republicans, although their principles are good, have been generally losing elections in Oregon. So we have to figure out how to change that. And I think we're going to do a lot of good. I don't know how much. We'll know that in 2014.
Well, you're right on from the standpoint of being elected around the state, because I think the last less effective person in terms of running a statewide race was former Governor Vic Atiyeh.
But he
Well
was a very
liked,
fine
well
man.
respectful,
Yeah.
kind of a guy, and
Very fine.
very
very
committed to
fine
Oregon.
man.
You know what I'm saying?
And, but you know, there are a lot of men like that among us.
And
a lot.
women. And women.
Yes, men and women.
Right.
There are a lot of men and women, not to take away from Governor Atiyeh,
Right.
but there are many, many Americans, good men and women that we could elect to office. My friend Scott Carpenter died recently. He was an astronaut, a very famous astronaut. He was the second man in orbit. Scott valued what he thought of as can-do Americans. Americans could do things, and he was, and he did some remarkable things in the space program. And I sometimes put it, I talk about American wild cards. If you look back at American history, it seems like every time our country gets in trouble, some people come out of the woodwork and fix it. And the question is why? And I know why. Because in a free, true free country with true liberty, every card in the deck's a wild card. Everybody can be this. And so Scott was especially famous because he was the second man in orbit, and on the second round the Earth, the attitude control system in his spacecraft failed. And he had to fly that thing back into the ocean by looking out the window and adjusting things by eye with his hands. But it took liberty created the engineers that built the thing. Liberty brought them together, and liberty made it possible to do these things. And you know, the average age of the engineer in the space program was 26 years. We went to the moon with 26-year-old engineers on
26.
average. 26. And these young people were free. And because they were free, they were able to do these things. And Scott Carpenter was just another free man there in the right place at the right time, and he did what people do. He did what was necessary. And we can all do what is necessary. Whether it's in our private lives, you know, we worry about our children, we worry about our mortgages, we worry about these things. We can all rise to the occasion in our place and do what is necessary, unless we are prevented from doing that. And that's what government overreach is doing to us. That's why we must elect more people who understand American liberty, because every time one of our wild cards turns around and says, I can fix it, a bureaucrat stands there and says, no, you can't. Fill out this form, please. And then another form. And then he taxes him. Then he regulates him. And the wild card, the can-do American, is still standing there saying, I want to fix it. And the government is saying, no. And this is harmful to all of us, and that's what needs to change.
You know, another interesting discussion we had was your views and your feelings and your definition of the so-called outreach. I mean, the Republican Party was being told from a national perspective that they had to outreach to Hispanics, blacks, and women, and the like. You responded. How did you respond?
I don't like those terms.
Okay.
You can use, you're right, of course, and they create outreach programs. What does this mean? Man comes into your community, he's a little different. And he says, I'm the outreach person to your community. What does he really mean? I'm downreach. I'm here to, we're going to condescend to talk with you. This is nonsense. Go to the grocery store and look around. Do you know how different people are? Just look at them. They're short, tall, fat, thin. They have all kinds of characteristics. Look at how different human beings are. Those are all genetic characteristics. The color of their skin, for example, is such a minor characteristic among all the changes that it's irrelevant. And yet these people have subdivided Americans. I don't like those subdivisions. I don't think it's a good idea for the Republican Party or anybody else to say, oh, I must reach out to the African Americans. I must reach out to the Hispanics. Nonsense. All I see is Americans. I see Americans and I see visitors to America. That's what we have in our country. And we have human beings, and they're all different. And the genetic differences are enormous. And if you want to talk about skin color, it's one of the most minor genetic differences. And yet What happens is those who want power over Americans, those who want power and money, the bureaucrats and politicians who really wish us ill to their own benefit, they divide us. They try to divide us. They create divisions. There's the division for race. They call it race. It's just genetic difference. There's a division on sex. There's a division on this, a division on that. They create divisions. They make America into a population of minorities, and then people get in and lead the minorities against one another. This is nonsense. We're all Americans. And if you want to talk about genetic differences, the differences that we disregard are huge compared to the differences that we allow them to divide ourselves with. So you and I talked about this in guiding the Republican Party, and you're playing an important part in the state now. It was in Multnomah County. And the part you're playing in the state, I said, and you agreed, we're not going to reach out to African Americans or Hispanics. We're going out to reach to all Americans because we're all in this together. And it just is not good for our people or productive to try to look around and find differences between us by which we can classify ourselves. Just craziness. When I go shopping sometimes late at night in Medford because we buy our food over there. There's a Food for Less, pretty cheap, and I'll fill my Suburban with food. We have a lot of people to eat at our house. And often the Hispanics are shopping in there. And firstly, they're very family oriented. You see 3 generations shopping together. When I look at those people, I think, that's a very hard-working looking man there. I'd like to have him working with me. I look at them for the characteristics that they show that are productive. I see the mother bustling around there, working with her children. I see a couple of men that look like they could do a really good day's work. And I couldn't care less where they came from. It is important to obey the immigration laws, and we have a debate about that, but separating Americans by characteristics, genetic characteristics, for political purposes or any other purpose is just counterproductive. So when I walk into a room, you can see what I am, and you can see what you are. But I had an experience, if I can take the time, we had this issue in Josephine County.
Okay.
And I went to a meeting, and as I walked in, a nice lady says, "Art, watch out for him. He's not one of us." And I looked over, and there's a little counterculture guy walking in. Good-looking man, but he had a little ponytail, he's a little different. So I gave my talk about things, and then I said, I've lived in Josephine County 33 years, and there are a lot of people here that are different from me. When I see one of those people, I'm glad they're there. Because if they're free to do what they want, I'm free to do what I want. And then I pointed to this man that she'd pointed out in the front row, and I said, this man here, for example, I'm sure he didn't vote for me. You know what he said? I will next time. Because that's what he wanted. You understand?
I understand.
And that shows he and I couldn't be more different culturally.
Right.
But where it counted, we're the same.
Right. Hey, Art, I tell you what. Now, again, I've given you the opportunity to meet this man. I met him via Jeff Mapes. Thanks to Jeff Mapes and the Oregonian. Very great.
Jeff
Fantastic.
may not appreciate that.
Boy, I like Jeff Mapes. I tell you, thank you very much, Jeff. But I would also like to see whether or not you might entertain the idea of doing a similar article like you did on Art, who happens to be a Republican, on Frank, who I know. Frank, who happens to be a Democrat, and he's the chair.
He's the chair of the
Democratic Party, and I've had Frank on the show before. But I'd like for Jeff maybe to do a piece on him, and then maybe I can interview him, and maybe I get both of you guys to come out.
Well, that'd be great. Maybe I could convert him to vote for our candidate.
Well, that'd be a great deal.
I could explain to him why it'd be better for him.
Well, we'll entertain that deal. We'll let Jeff initiate it to begin with, right?
Okay,
we'll
I'll
get Jeff do that.
I'd love to have be on with him.
Good. I tell you what, we have a few minutes. I tell you what, let's see if we can open up the line and see if we might be able to get a couple of calls here. And see what you thought about the interview that I've just done with Art here. And, you never know. There might be someone out there that might want to say hi to you. Okay, is that okay with you?
Sure,
okay.
Whatever you want to do.
So tell me, while we're waiting for a caller or something of this nature, so what do you go for me? What are you going to be saying to those folks? Again, I'm thinking about the party now, the Republican Party. Folks who have they've identified themselves as independents or libertarians or you're on and on and on. How do you bring them all under the same roof again to talk about some of the issues
I
you're talking
don't think they'll come under the same roof.
about? Okay, all right.
They're all Americans.
Okay.
They all share the same values. As I mentioned, these values are timeless. They're thousands of years old. Freedom, liberty, the things which were sort of codified in our founding documents, by the founding fathers, these are built into human nature. In fact, that's the genetic that we have in common.
So you're inviting Democrats too, regardless. Are you?
Well, of course, I'm not inviting them. They're already there.
Right. Okay.
And the genetic similarities we have, which cause us all to want freedom,
Right.
to be free to enjoy our lives, the blessing of our lives, that's what we have in common. The Republican Party is a tool that can be used politically to help everyone understand that. But we want everybody's vote.
Oh, good. I like that. Look like we've got a caller. Calling you on the air. Your question or comment, please. Yeah,
Yes, I was calling you about how amazing it was to hear from Art Robinson.
What was that again now?
To listen to Art Robinson.
Okay, good.
Speaking common sense to the folks of this country.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate that very much.
Thank you very much.
Is there a
We need
question?
a great deal more of that.
Would you like to have a
spread
question?
throughout-
Would you like to ask him a question or anything?
I would just like to know how we could get his dialogue and his educational abilities with his children spread throughout our state.
Okay. I
Well,
appreciate that.
we're doing
Thank you
every-
very much, caller.
He and I are both plagiarizing.
Okay.
He used common sense. I wrote a book, Common Sense, in 2012,
Oh, is that
expressing
right?
these values, and of course we both stole it for Thomas Paine.
Okay.
But that's what we're trying to do. Those values he's talking about, he just said spread within our state.
Right.
They are spread within our state, but we have to make people realize it. They have to understand that these are the values we need to follow in our political process. They're already in everyone's heart. It's all built in. All we have to do is awaken them in all the voters. It's not a question of our having something special we can teach them. They've already got it, but we haven't been doing a good job of helping them recognize that.
Well, you know, you hear this too. You know, this desire, if you will, I want to come out and be a part of, and that's what
Yeah.
this American dream was all
Sure.
about to begin with. You know what I'm saying? And because of this caller that we just had here, there are many other folks that are out there, but they've basically been put in the closet, and now they may be coming out.
Well, they are.
Okay.
And even within the Republican Party, politicians like to classify people. And there was a very fine speaker, Russ Walker, at a recent dinner we had, and he pointed out that 10 years ago, polls showed that 15% of the Republicans themselves identified as pro-liberty voters. Now it's 41%. And this is not to try to explain the things on too high a level. When we in Josephine County, we got the voters to visualize what it would be like to have that overreaching bureaucrat demanding entrance to their homes. This was a liberty issue. This was a government overreach issue. But the voter understood it viscerally. He didn't have to have it explained to him. He visualized that guy demanding to come in and see if he fixed his own plumbing without a permit. And by golly, he knew what he thought about it.
And you know, again, for the benefit of the viewer, the definition of pro-liberty as it's being laid out. 'Cause
Just means
I know Jeff Walker. I know Walker.
It's just
Freedom works.
it's just the principle
Okay.
that each of us, life is a fantastic blessing, a wonderful blessing. Each of us has the human right to enjoy our lives with the maximum amount of freedom, as long as we don't encroach on the freedom of someone else to do the same. And one of the things that government does is to referee when we get in each other's way. So if you have a local government, for example, and you're running your house a certain way, you know, and you're living your life near your home, if it starts to encroach on your neighbor's freedom, then the local government can come in and say, you two guys have to get along, let's see what compromise we can make, and we have some laws. But to the greatest extent possible, we should have the right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, property, the things that are necessary to enjoy the wonderful lives that we've been given. And we must be sure that our government doesn't get in the way of that freedom. And our problem is that that's what it's been doing.
Again, we have just got about 2 minutes or so, but again, for the benefit of those individuals that are out there that might be really upfront, honest people, American that wants to run for office.
Yeah.
But in many cases, the media is sort of like the wall there. What do you say to media? I want you to educate the media for a moment. What do you say to media about getting them involved in this process?
Well, the media, of course, their responsibility is to represent all the people in the public spectrum accurately.
Right.
And we hope that they will do so. Sometimes they become more interested in a particular politics, and they shouldn't. They should be unbiased. But to the people in general, I say run for office. The guys we have in office, the career politicians we have in office, have not been doing a good job for us. And the more ordinary people stand up and say, I'll do this job for a while. Do you know, in the first 100 years of our country, the average congressman served only 2 years. They were citizen volunteers. None of them thought of personal gain from office. We need to go back to that. And I'm urging people throughout the Republican Party to run for office. Whether they want, in fact, I prefer that they not want careers. I want outstanding people, and that doesn't mean somebody that's everybody knows. It can be someone who's quiet. But the more the American people step forward and take the political process into their own hands and run for office themselves, the closer we will come to returning to our basic values.
So maybe you're thinking about the possibility of redefining, if you will, as far as term limits and whatever.
Well, yeah, people talk about term limits, and given that these guys are serving, like DeFazio, 25 years, and the average is 12, it's hard to oppose term limits. They're just there too long. The longer they're there, the more they serve their careers and not us. But we have the ability to term limit them ourselves. Every 2 years we get a shot at them in Congress, and every 6 years at a senator. Why should we have Merkley care? Or why should we have Wyden care or DeFazio care? Why can't we go down and choose our own doctor?
Interesting.
We don't need DeFazio care.
Well, it's interesting how you're making that statement, because everybody was kind of like making the point about Obamacare. And,
well, you know, he's getting all the blame, and he, of course, would like the credit, but these ideas about enslaving peoples in medical care have been around for decades.
Okay. Art, it's really been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And thank
It's
you
a
very,
pleasure,
very much
pleasure
for
to be on your
being
program.
part.
Thank you.
Hey, folks, as Art Robinson, I'm looking to see Frank from the Democratic Party here very shortly. Maybe I'll get these guys together.
That'd be wonderful.
Take care,
I'm
folks.
on.
Sounds great. Have a good one, folks. I'll see you next week with another interesting guest.